a critical flaw in Kubernetes was patched, or was it?
So Matt, you have a story about a Kubernetes vulnerability?
Yeah, it's interesting because this is actually a Kubernetes vulnerability that existed a year ago, and it sort of was assumed that it had been patched properly. This company called Twistlock, who sort of does container security, one of their researchers took a look at this bug that came out last year in March. And the gist of the bug is that when you're moving data in and out of a container, there's a special program called kubectl, Kubernetes Control, kind of short for. And you can move files from inside out using this copy command within kubectl. And when it does that, it also tars it up first. So it grabs everything using the tar binary inside of that container to package it and then bring it outside. But the interesting thing about that is that it assumes that there's a valid and non-malicious tar control program running inside of it. So if you were to upload a container to your system that has a malicious tar, it can do other things, like make a malicious file path to specify where it gets extracted to, and you can overwrite stuff. So that's the gist of the old bug, and they thought they'd fixed it. Fixing a problem isn't just fixing the immediate problem that's been presented to you. Oftentimes it's thinking about how else could this break, or what would an attacker do next. There was a directory traversal bug back in the day where like you specify like .. / in that path where it gets extracted to, and you can jump all over in the file system right where you want to. But they realized that they fixed it for the one case, but you could still create a symlink. Which is, it's a file, it's kind of a file that points to another location within the file system, and they weren't checking for that in the original patch. So this new version allows you to do effectively the same thing you did before, but instead of specifying, a file location, you specify this symlink, which points to another file location. So you still have the problem. And they had a pretty interesting proof of concept where you can overwrite the bash RC for somebody else. And in Linux, that's what happened. Anytime you open up a new shell, your bash RC gets executed. So if you can modify somebody else's, anytime they log in, they run your code. So it's a pretty neat bug. Very well written up, I think, and I thought it was pretty neat, especially because containerization is a big trend right now.
I was going to say, Kubernetes is kind of omnipresent at this point in software development and containerization, web stuff, web services, microservices. The fact that there's such a sort of potentially dangerous vulnerability found by this group in something that's pretty widespread and getting a lot of use and sort of a hot, trendy technology right now, that's something, it's a little bit concerning. Are there any known exploits for this? Or?
I don't think anyone's exploited it in the wild quite yet. And I think that there is a patch for it. It's just that this is a bug that had been assumed fixed and clearly was not. So I think a lot of people will want to pay attention to this. If you're using any containerization software, it's time to check to see if you're using Kubernetes and time to patch. There are some limitations to it. Like there's really two main attack vectors. One is you've grabbed a container that you don't understand off the internet and you're executing it because you trust it, which is generally a bad idea. Or someone else has a way to get into your container and swap out that binary. So you should at least be able to detect both of those cases. What do you think, John?
I was going to say, I think it's also kind of interesting in that, when you do why would a copy command of any kind call tar or execute any kind of executable? It just seems like that's something that should be removed as a feature.
Well, the bigger thing, I think, is why would you trust the contents of a container to execute for you? Like if there's a way to do it, then it probably should be something running in Kubernetes itself and not relying on the contents of the container, which really can't be trusted in the first place. But yeah, I agree with you.
To change it to bash RC, you just owned that person.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. So I think there was some discussion in that document from Twistlock that they are working on finding another way of doing this that doesn't rely on the contents of that container to execute this command, which I think is the right approach.
Preventative measures for the Kubernetes issue are really just to patch, make sure you're on the latest version.
And if you are someone who is involved with bringing in stuff that's in a container in Kubernetes, understanding the risks involved with bringing in packages that you have no idea where they came from or who wrote them, because that is one of the attack vectors in this case.